The Panther's commander never saw the enemy. His gun was already loaded. His optics were among the finest ever fitted to a tank. The thick, sloped armor surrounding him had survived countless engagements across Europe. Every lesson the German army had learned since 1940 told him he held the advantage. Then the forest erupted. Not from the front. Not from another tank. Not even from an anti-Midas tank gun. The explosions arrived from nowhere, shaking 40-5 tons of steel so violently that the crew believed they had taken a direct hit. Periscopes shattered. Vision blocks exploded inward. Radio antennas disappeared. Dust and smoke filled the fighting compartment. Yet when the commander checked the armor, there was no penetration. His tank was still intact. So why was the battle already over? The answer wasn't hidden inside the Panther. It was hidden inside an entirely different philosophy of war. By the winter of 1944, Germany believed victory belonged to the side that built the superior machine. The United States believed victory belonged to the side that connected information faster than its enemy. Those two ideas would collide in the frozen forests of the Ardennes, and only one would survive. Midas to understand why the Panther became one of history's most feared tanks. You first have to understand the battlefield it was built for. German armored doctrine never expected a fair fight. It expected dominance. Ever since the lightning campaigns of 1939 and 1940, German commanders believed armored warfare depended on striking first, seeing farther, and destroying the enemy before he could respond. Every new generation of tanks reflected that belief. The Panther represented its highest expression. Its sharply angled frontal armor could deflect shells that would have punched through earlier designs. Its high minus velocity 75 mm KW Yokai 40 gun combined exceptional accuracy with remarkable penetration against most Allied tanks. It could open fire long before the enemy even reached an effective range. To the crews inside American Shermans, that distance meant life or death. Battlefield studies conducted after the fighting revealed an uncomfortable pattern. German ANCs frequently scored their first hits hundreds of yards before American crews could realistically answer. Every yard spent closing that gap became another opportunity to be destroyed. Tank crews learned quickly that bravery alone solved nothing. Closing the distance often meant driving directly into carefully prepared killing zones, many American commanders avoiding frontal engagements whenever possible. Instead, Shermans worked together. One tank distracted. Another maneuvered. A third searched desperately for the thinner side armor. Victory depended on teamwork because individual superiority belonged to the Panther. German commanders trusted that advantage. Their optics were excellent. Their guns were deadly. Their armor inspired confidence. Everything pointed toward winning direct engagements. But every strength assumed the battle would unfold according to familiar rules. It assumed the greatest threat would appear somewhere visible. That assumption was about to become fatal. Minus while German engineers perfected tanks. American planners quietly invested somewhere else. Not inside factories, inside communication. Every infantry battalion moved forward with soldiers carrying equipment that looked almost insignificant beside a 40-5- ton tank. Binoculars, maps, compasses, portable radios. None of them could destroy armor. Yet together they formed something entirely new. Among the infantry, certain officers and non-coincident officers sorted as forward observers. Unlike Riflemen, their primary mission wasn't killing enemy soldiers. It was finding them. Sometimes they crawled into shell craters flooded with icy water. Sometimes they climbed damaged church towers. Sometimes they hid beneath shattered hedgerows only a few hundred yards from German positions. Their greatest weapon wasn't courage. It was patience. They watched. They measured. They waited for armor to appear. The moment a Panther entered their field of view, everything changed. Not because they fired, because they spoke. A short radio transmission left the observer's hand set. Just a few numbers. Grid coordinates. Estimated target type. Direction of movement. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Inside the tank, nothing seemed different. The crew continued scanning for enemy armor. The commander searched through expensive Zeiss optics. The gunner tracked likely firing positions. The driver maintained formation. No one realized that somewhere beyond the horizon, dozens of men had already begun working to destroy them. The radio message didn't travel to the nearest artillery battery. That would have been too slow. Instead, it reached one of the least glamorous places on the battlefield, the Fire Direction Center. From the outside, there was little to see. Sometimes it occupied a cellar beneath a ruined farmhouse. Sometimes a muddy tent hidden among trees. Sometimes a hastily dug bunker covered with camouflage nets. Inside, however, the atmosphere resembled an engineering laboratory more than a battlefield. Large maps covered wooden nables. Transparent overlays displayed artillery sectors. Field telephones rang constantly. Radios crackled without pause. Soldiers surrounded plotting boards with slide rules, firing tables, pencils, and notebooks. The observer's report arrived. Instantly, the Panther ceased being the tank. It became mathematics. Human-computer soldiers trained specifically for ballistic calculations went to work. Distance, elevation, wind direction, temperature, humidity, air density, propellant characteristics. They were aware. Every factor capable of changing a shell's flight entered the calculation. Each correction shaved precious yards from potential error. Within moments, firing solutions emerged. Then another transformation occurred. The target no longer belonged to a single artillery battery. It belonged to every gun within range. One battery hidden behind an orchard. Another concealed behind frozen ridgelines. A third dug into woodland miles away. Each occupied different positions. Each fired different distances. Yet everyone received carefully calculated firing data tailored specifically to its location. The observers had found the target. The Fire Direction Center had solved the problem. Now the guns simply waited for one final command. Far ahead, inside the Panther, none of this existed. The commander still believed he was preparing for a duel. He had no reason to think otherwise. The battlefield, he understood, revolved around visible opponents. Direct fire, armor thickness, and superior gunnery. He never imagined that somewhere far beyond his vision, an invisible network had already begun closing around him, and by the time the first artillery crews pulled their firing lanyards, escape was no longer a matter of armor. It had become a matter of time. The first shells landed wide. One burst through frozen earth 50 yards beyond the Panther. Another exploded well short of the road. Inside the tank, the commander barely reacted. This looked familiar. Artillery had always been imprecise. Its purpose was disruption, not destruction. The crew waited for the barrage to drift away, confident their armor would outlast the random explosions. What they couldn't know was that the shells weren't ever intended to hit. They were measuring, miles away. The forward observer watched columns of smoke rise through his binoculars. He didn't need another target. He already had one. A brief transmission followed. Light 100, drop 50, fire for effect. Within seconds, the Fire Direction Center recalculated every firing solution. New corrections reached batteries scattered across the countryside. Then something extraordinary happened. Instead of firing independently, every battery became part of a single weapon. American artillery commanders had perfected a technique that transformed dozens of separated guns into one synchronized strike. It was called time on target. Each battery received not only aiming data, but an exact second to fire. A battery farther away might fire first. Another closer to the target waited several seconds longer. Different shell weights, different propellant charges, different flight times. Every variable was calculated so that every projectile reached the same point almost simultaneously. For the German crews, there would be no warning, no gradual increase in shell fire, no opportunity to seek cover after hearing the first explosions. The battlefield would remain quiet until everything detonated at once. The winter sky suddenly disappeared beneath steel. Dozens of shells descended together, not one after another. Together, the road vanished inside overlapping explosions. Earth erupted, trees snapped apart, fragments ripped through branches, snow and frozen air. The concussion hammered armored vehicles from every direction. The Panther's suspension slammed violently against the ground. The commander grabbed for balance, before anyone could recover. Another innovation made the bombardment even more devastating. Many of the incoming shells never touched the ground. Hidden inside their noses was one of the war's most closely guarded inventions, the variable time proximity fuse. Rather than waiting for impact, a tiny radio transmitter inside each shell measured its distance above the ground. The instant it detected the correct height, the shell exploded in midair. Instead of burying itself in dirt before detonating, it burst directly above its target. The difference was enormous. Ground bursts wasted much of their energy underground. Air bursts directed thousands of steel fragments downward like a gigantic shotgun blast. Everything exposed became vulnerable. Infantry riding on tank decks, open hatches, periscopes, machine Midas gun mounts, optical sights, radio antennas, tracks. Even armored vehicles that survived without penetration suddenly lost their ability to fight. The Panther's greatest protection had always been its thick frontal armor. But armor designed to stop horizontal attack offered little protection against fragments raining from directly overhead. The crew remained alive, yet blindness spread through the fighting compartment. Vision blocks shattered. Observation optics disappeared. Communication failed. External equipment broke apart. Some crews suffered concussions from repeated blasts hammering their steel hulls. Others abandoned perfectly repairable tanks simply because they could no longer see or coordinate the battle. The vehicle remained intact. Its combat value did not. German after minus action reports began describing something deeply unsettling. They spoke of artillery that seemed almost supernatural. Columns advancing through forests found themselves bracketed with astonishing speed. Tanks concealed beneath heavy tree cover suddenly received devastating fire despite never exposing themselves to direct observation. Entire armored formations became trapped on narrow roads before their commanders even understood they had been discovered. Too many German officers? The shell fire appeared almost psychic. It wasn't. It was systematic. When observers on the ground couldn't maintain visibility, another layer of the network took over. High above the battlefield circled one of the least intimidating aircraft of the Second World War, the Il-70 for Grasshopper. It carried no bombs, no rockets, no heavy armament. Its thin fabric-covered airframe looked more suited to a civilian flying club than a combat zone. Yet it possessed one priceless advantage. It could fly slowly, extremely slowly. The Grasshopper drifted over forests, villages, and valleys where faster aircraft could never safely loiter. Its pilot searched patiently for movement beneath tree cover. A panther invisible from ground level often stood out clearly from above. Once spotted, the pilot became another forward observer, another pair of eyes feeding coordinates into the same artillery network. Whether the target was discovered by infantry hidden inside a ditch or by a pilot circling overhead mattered little. The result remained identical. Within minutes, dozens of unseen guns could concentrate overwhelming fire on a single position. The battlefield itself had become interconnected. Every observer strengthened every gun. Every gun reinforced every observer. No individual tank, regardless of its armor, could escape a system designed to combine information at such speed. The Ardennes offensive exposed this contrast with brutal clarity. German armored columns pushed through narrow roads bordered by dense forests. The terrain restricted movement. Vehicles advanced bumper to bumper through natural corridors. Perfect conditions for breakthrough attacks. Perfect conditions for artillery as well. Once observers identified the lead vehicles, synchronized fire sealed the roads. Destroyed or immobilized tanks blocked everyone behind them. Fresh units entering the congestion encountered the same concentrated bombardment. Within minutes, powerful spearheads slowed into tangled traffic jams of armor, trucks, infantry, and supply vehicles. Many Panthers remained outwardly impressive. Their armor still resisted direct fire. Their guns remained lethal, yet they sat motionless. Optics destroyed, tracks broken, crew members wounded, communications severed. Mission kills rather than spectacular explosions. For German commanders, this proved deeply frustrating. They had invested enormous industrial effort into producing some of history's finest armored vehicles, yet increasingly, those machines found themselves defeated without ever fighting the kind of duel they had been designed to win. That is the real story hidden behind the silent panther sitting beside a frozen Ardennes road. Its defeat did not begin with an artillery shell. It began when one observer quietly reported a set of map coordinates. Everything that followed the calculations inside the fire direction center. The synchronized batteries, the airborne spotters, the proximity fuses, and the perfectly timed bombardment represented something larger than any single weapon. Germany sought battlefield superiority by perfecting individual machines. America pursued superiority by perfecting the connections between soldiers, information, and firepower. One philosophy trusted steel, the other trusted speed of decision. The Panther commander searched for an opponent he could engage face to face. Instead, he confronted an invisible network stretching across miles of battlefield-day network capable of turning one observation into the concentrated fire of an entire artillery battalion. Long after the Ardennes, armies around the world would continue building stronger tanks, faster aircraft, and more accurate weapons. But the lesson forged during that winter never disappeared. Wars would increasingly be decided not by who possessed the single most powerful machine, but by who could detect first, communicate fastest, process information more efficiently, and strike before the enemy understood what was happening. The age of isolated weapons was fading. The age of connected warfare had already begun.